We are in the last week of PTR testing, and 11.2 is about to come out. This week, they pushed out a lot of hotfixes and gave us one last balance patch that nerfed a lot of the top specs. Frost DK got some heavy nerfs to Deathbringer and a flat 3% on top of that. These came out to be an 8% single target nerf and 4% AoE nerf. However, people are just playing the Rider's tree now, and Frost DK is still strong. But because Frost got nerfed, people went on to try Unholy DK and Keys, and discovered it's pretty good. Both Frost and Unholy are basically the same thing now. They play the same tree, have the same cooldown timing and damage profile. The Unholy nerfs are kinda whatever, and they were mostly aimed at Sand Lane, single target and raid, but Riders is still doing a very high single target and raid. Dev Evoker got a tier set nerf that amounted to about 6% AoE loss and 3% single target loss. The spec still does a lot of damage. Hunter got a pretty big nerf to both hero trees, and then on top of that, 20% off trick shots damage. This was approximately a 4% single target nerf and 10% AoE nerf, maybe more or less depending on target count. BM also got hit with another 3% off. This is like the third consecutive 3% nerf to BM. But because of the MM nerf, some hunters are swapping back to BM, and finding it is still kind of good, doing pretty decent AoE and single target and keys. Fire Mage also got a massive nerf amounting to about 10% overall and 4% single target. Mages have kinda just stopped playing fire. Arcane also got nerfed specifically in its funnel. It lost about 5% damage in AoE and funnel, but only like 1% in pure single target. Feral got a very minor buff to a pure single target talent of about 3%. Windwalker had a weird week. They had a very strong tier set that got gutted in this patch, and even though they gave base Windwalker an 8% damage increase, it still came out to be a 6% nerf to the conduit tree. However, at the end of the week, they sent out a bug fix for Shadowpan, and it actually is looking kinda decent. Wretch got an AoE buff to Wake of Ashes and Divine Storm, but because Templar presses so many Hammer of Lights and does so much damage with Empyrean Hammer, there's only like a 2 to 3% AoE increase. It's more for Herald, but Herald is still behind. And then all three rogue specs got a nice buff across the board. Thub got an AoE buff on Trickster and a flat 5%. They did nerf Deathstalker though, not sure why they did that. Outlaw got a weird 3.5% buff with a nerf to Blade Flurry to compensate. However, I do believe the AoE is still a little bit up from before. And Assassination got a large buff with a 4% flat and a tier set buff. Assassination is looking incredibly strong in M+ now. Destro Warlock got a nerf to their Hellcaller tree, came out to about a 4% AoE nerf, but they buffed Chaos Bolt, and now there is a Chaos Bolt-centric Diabolus build simming quite high in single target for raid. And then, unmentioned in the notes, they just completely killed off the Balanced Druid Keeper 4 set. It stores a fraction of what it used to, and Boomy is now just one of the lowest single target specs, unlikely to be played in raid, but even if it is, they are forced to play a Loon, which isn't as practical. Also undocumented was a pet nerf for Org Evoker, which is about a 30% reduction in Scout Commander tier set damage. Org was already looking to be low damage in M+, and now it seems like it's kinda trash. Maybe it's still good in raid, or maybe it's good with Chrono Warden, I don't really know about that. And there was pretty much no tank tuning. Vengeance got a slight parry nerf, but that is unlikely to matter, and Brewmaster did get some damage from the Shadowpan bug fix. The only healer to be changed was H-Power with some nice buffs of Herald, but they also did kill a Discrease build where you replace Smite with Holy Nova, which is probably a good thing. So they did end up nerfing most of the specs that are OP in Mythic Plus this build. Single target tuning is looking okay, but there are some outliers like Demo and Destrolock at the top, and then Boomy and Enhanced Charm at the bottom. I did make a final tier list for Mythic Plus as its own video, so if you are interested in that, go check it out on my channel. Now, we did have a dungeon tuning patch, which did fix the things that they messed up last week, like the fish stick change and Halls of Atonement curse change. In Gambit, the fish sticks are no longer totems, meaning they behave like Cinderbrew barrels and just get cleaved down. I initially thought this would make the mechanic trivial, but after playing a bit, I found a lot of comps do not one-shot fish sticks, outside of cooldowns. The sword toss in the second area trash got made less lethal but instant, and the second boss got made easier, with an arrow visual when you are targeted with a hook and a reduction in the damage intake in the fight. Halls of Atonement got some routing changes. They reduced the count needed by about 10% and removed some mobs in the second area. They also fixed the dispel issue. Siphon Life is now a channel cast by the collector that can be stopped instead of a magic dispel, and then they increased the duration of the former curse to 12 seconds, so a healer can dispel both in a set of 2. And they also increased the cooldown so it happens less often. And they removed some casters from the dungeon. The second area got made easier with damage reductions in the ankle biters and eviscerators, and also much easier for melee as they removed its Bladestorm mechanic. Ecodome got a small change at the start. They weren't happy with us skipping mobs, so they moved the 2 Ravagers up to the top of the stairs, added a new 3-pack where they were, and then they made the first Sentinel unskippable, and attempting to walk past him will cause him to pull. This mob is really hard. A lot of trinket tuning happened this week. They nerfed basically every good trinket from Season 2, and even some trinkets in Season 3 got hit, like Sephorium. They did buff a lot of terrible Season 3 trinkets. Some of them seem pretty good now. They did do a small nerf to the 2-minute Araz trinket though. Also, they pushed a 50% nerf to the Void Touch Fragment trinket, which means there's kind of no good Delve trinkets anymore. There was also a bit of a cloak fiasco. It turned out the boots were increasing the cloak by 150% instead of 50%, so they turned off the boots on PTR. The cloak was doing 4 to 5% overall before, and now it was doing 2% with no boots. They did end up buffing it by an additional 30%. Speaking of the boots, they made it so that lower difficulty boots gave less effect than the mythic boots, with 10% off per difficulty. For reference, 10% cloak effect is about 0.3% single target DPS. This does make the optional boss more lucrative, and it was also confirmed in an interview that the optional boss is required for Hall of Fame. Now, this is the last week before 11.2, but PTR will stay up and they will probably push a few more hotfixes. I expect a few more nerfs and buffs to egregious classes. I may or may not make another PTR recap video depending on what they do. But if I don't, thank you for watching all my PTR content for this cycle. I plan on releasing a few videos next week. I'll make a Stormbringer Enhancement Shaman guide. I may or may not make a Totemic guide depending on if they buff it or not. It's pretty bad right now. I don't really see anyone trying to play it in a serious capacity. But I will probably make a video on what to play next season as a Shaman. And maybe I'll make some Ellie content. I don't know about that. I do have kind of limited time.